In this apartment behind this door is a family in chaos. A mother and her teenage son are arguing and have been for a while. The boy, who is tall, athletic, and strong, appears to dislike parental authority over him and is now becoming increasingly violent. Also in this living room is a little girl no more than 6 years old, and she's watching the chaos unfold. Hiding in fear, she watches as her teenage brother suddenly throws his mother violently across the room into a wall. He throws her so hard that her body is now limp. Both the teenager and little girl are both in shock. The mother's body, as well as the room, is now silent, and the 6-year-old thinks her mother is deleted. Soon the apartment is filled with police, around 12 to be exact, and the little girl watches as the cops try to take hold of and control her brother, who has become like a wild animal again. Scared of her brother and afraid for the safety of her mother, unfortunately for this little girl, what happened wasn't anything new. Toxic things like this happened more often than a 6-year-old should see. But it was moments like this that would help develop incredible worlds and songwriting skills in this girl. Due to frequent moments like this is when she tried to find escape from her scary family, and music was her only savior. Due to moments like this is what helped to shape and develop one of the most influential singers of all time. But did the devil come to collect? I have to let you know that I was working on this video well before the sudden and unfortunate passing of Mariah's mother and sister yesterday. This just happened to be unfortunate timing, and I mean no disrespect by the contents of this video, just an informative documentary about a brilliant singer. I'd also like to issue a trigger warning for those of you who are sensitive to dark imagery and content, as well as discussions about cults and satanic rituals, especially those involving non-adults. These accounts come from the mouths of Mariah Carey's siblings and their experiences with the dark cults of their childhood. Because I wasn't there and cannot prove such, I will continue to say allegedly. But I'll leave it up to you whether you believe it or not. Viewer discretion is advised. Mariah Carey, the living legend, has made her incredible mark in music history with her multi-octave voice and record-breaking string of hits, mainly number ones, that spans a multitude of decades. But she was more than just an incredible singer. She was also a brilliant songwriter, writing or co-writing the vast majority of her catalog. Singing and writing came as natural to her as speaking, as she developed this love of music from an extremely young age. And it's her undying love of music that helped rescue her mentally and emotionally in her childhood, as things were extremely scary and toxic around her. To escape her reality, Mariah had to go inside herself and live in the fantasy of creating music and live in that world while everything and everyone around her was falling apart and a detriment to her. But living in Fantasyland could only save her for so long. The danger was still there and only going to get worse. Mariah Carey, born to Patricia and Alfred Roy Carey on March 27, 1969 in Huntington, New York, was set to be the golden child. A biracial child born to her white mother and black Venezuelan father, Mariah was born to a family that was already suffering in turmoil, both inner and outer. Patricia and Alfred already had 2 older children prior to Mariah, sister Alison and brother Morgan. And according to them, life as biracial children growing up in an all-white neighborhood was the worst. Because they were older, they got to experience the absolute worst that being a biracial at that time could get. They were constantly bullied, beat up, and even spit on by neighborhood kids. They had no sense of belonging and didn't know where they fit in socially. Black children didn't like them because they looked too different from them, and white children hated them because all it took was a little black blood to make them the N-words. On top of the constant violence they endured at the hands of racist neighbors, they also had to witness the constant fighting between their parents, as well as the daily emasculation of their father. Because racism was so bad back then, it was beyond taboo to see an interracial couple together as a family. Oftentimes, whenever the Careys would be on their way home, Patricia would have to walk far ahead of Alfred and her own children, like she wasn't with them, and into the house. And Alfred would have to come trailing in moments later so it didn't look like they lived together. They wouldn't even be able to purchase or rent a home if it was known that they were together, no home was ever safe for the Careys because racist neighbors would throw bricks at the window and try to cause great harm to them. So living as an interracial couple was hell for the whole family. Then by the time Mariah came along, things only got worse. Baby Mariah was seen as a golden child, and it wasn't appreciated by her siblings. You see, Mariah was a very fair-skinned child, and she had blondish hair. She looked nothing like her darker-skinned siblings, and could actually pass as a white child, whereas her siblings couldn't. This immediately caused a rift of resentment from the older children to their younger sister. On top of that, they believed that Mariah got the great end of the stick as far as treatment, as well as life situations. By the time Mariah was 3, Patricia and Alfred divorced, and Patricia took Mariah to live with her, and the other two had to live with their father. This caused so much resentment because they assumed that Mariah was now living an easy, carefree life. Here she was, a white passing child and able to live the good life with their white mother, while they had to live in the hood of Harlem with their black father. But according to Mariah, nothing could be further from the truth. Mariah claims to remember just as much fear and hostility in her family as they had. She says the constant fights and abuse in the home made her keenly aware at a very early age when danger was coming. In her memoir, The Meaning of Mariah Carey, she alleges that her father was abusive, saying, "By the time I was a toddler, I had developed the instincts to sense when violence was coming." She recalls numerous fights between her father and Morgan, writing, "It was not uncommon for holes to be punched in walls or for other objects to go flying." According to Mariah, she also felt the intense isolation of what being a biracial was back then. She experienced the hatred from the white and black kids as her siblings previously had. Once Mariah was lured to a house alone by a group of white girls who were pretending to be her friends, and when they got her alone, they closed the door, circled around her, and began to viciously call her every derogatory racist name they could. No one was around to stop it, so she had to endure that. She also experienced a neglectful mother. Patricia clearly didn't know how to care for non-black hair, as Mariah claims her hair was always matted and unkempt, as were her clothes. It took Mariah's black grandmother to care for her hair and hygiene. There was hardly ever any food in the fridge. They moved constantly, and she was oftentimes left alone in the care of unsafe people. There was no stability for this supposed golden child. When she got a little older and her siblings moved in with her and her mother, things got even darker. Mariah had a very big fear of her brother Morgan. She said he had extreme anger issues, was very hostile and volatile, and unpredictably so. She said his anger was like a storm. She never knew when he'd fly off the handles. It wasn't rare for holes to be punched into walls or cops called. She oftentimes felt she needed to protect herself from him, and even felt she needed to protect her mother somehow, from him as well. Morgan was supposedly institutionalized a few times growing up because of his behavior. And by the time Alison moved back in with Patricia and Mariah, Mariah noticed that the sister she remembered as a small child no longer existed. The cool, pretty chick with the long, dark hair came back sullen and dark, and not in skin tone, but in aura. She'd become a mother at 16, left her father's house seeming resentful of him, but never disclosed why, and it seemed like the weight of the world had taken over this young girl. And it also seemed whatever darkness had taken over Alison, according to Mariah, Alison wanted it to take over Mariah too. Alison, who Mariah always referred to as her dandelion, was the big sister that Mariah wanted a close relationship with. Seeing that she didn't have many friends of her own, she wanted a friendship with her big sister. But the jealousy and resentment would always seem to rear its ugly head. Alison did several horrible things to Mariah that scarred her to this day. Alison was one that most would call a street girl. She hung out with pimps, prostitutes, and drug dealers. She was even a prostitute herself. But one would hope that she wouldn't try to push this off on her own sister, right? Mariah has this thing where she always refers to herself as eternally 12, and it's because of what her sister set her up to do at that age. In her memoir, Mariah claims that when she was 12, she was dragged and burned by her sister, who she also claims attempted to recruit her as a guest worker. She wrote, "When I was 12 years old, my sister drugged me with Valium, offered me a pinky nail full of cocaine, inflicted me with third-degree burns, and tried to sell me out to a pimp." Mariah claims her sister's boyfriend John was running a prostitution ring and that she was tricked into spending a night alone with him, ending up at a drive-in movie where almost immediately he put his arm around her and forced her to kiss him. She was horrified by the handgun that was resting against his thigh, and she described how she only escaped after another car pulled up next to them, an old man who could see that clearly something was wrong. This prompted John to drive her back home in uncomfortable silence. Mariah wrote, "Big sisters are supposed to protect you, not pimp you out." Then, still seeking to have a good relationship with her big sister, the final straw is when Alison scalded her. The incident in question started when Mariah, Alison, and their mother were at home together, trying to have a family tea time when their father called. Now, Mariah wasn't close with their father, but she also hadn't suffered from his physical and emotional abuse like her sister and brother had, which complicated Mariah's relationship with her siblings. When Mariah took the phone to speak to her father, she was only thinking about winning over her sister. This is what she wrote about the incident. "As I went through the mechanical niceties of the conversation, my sister began gesturing wildly, shaking her head and slicing her hand across her throat, signaling for me not to let on that she was there. As I tried my best to carry on the conversation with our father, I made silly faces back at her, doing all I could not to break into laughter. I thought we were playing a game. Eventually, I figured it was her turn to try and talk seriously to our father while I tried to make her laugh. So I said, 'Guess what? Alison is here. Want to talk to her?' Laughingly, I motioned at her to take the phone, but she wasn't looking at me. She was looking down at her mug of still steaming tea in her hand, and when she lifted her face, her eyes were rabid without a trace of playfulness. Before I realized what was happening, she yelled, 'No!' and in a flash threw the boiling hot tea on me. The next thing I remember, I was stripped down to my waist, and a doctor was removing the remaining bits of my top, which was embedded into the flesh of my shoulder with large tweezers," she writes. "My back was splattered with third-degree burns. I couldn't recognize it as mine, as it turned different shades of maroon from the violent scalding I received at the hands of my sister. The horrific physical sensation had been so intense that I blacked out." Mariah says that a touch as light as a pat on the back was painful for years following that incident. This was the final nail in the coffin of her attempted relationship with Alison and the hope for them as sisters. These situations really messed with Mariah mentally and stunted her mental growth to 12 for some reason. But why would her big sister do something like this? Why would she want to cause so much harm to her little sister? Jealousy.
Were you ever jealous of her? Yeah, of course. You know, she was very popular. She had a lot of friends. I didn't have any friends.
Their parents separated when Alison was 11. She says she was sent to live with her father. Her mother is white, her father is black. Mariah, however, rarely speaks about her interracial heritage.
My parents made me say, I am an interracial child. Okay, we're just going to alienate you right there. My mother said, nothing like that will ever happen to Mariah. I won't let it happen. And she moved, and Mariah became Italian and Irish.
At 16, Alison was already married and a mother, but she didn't stay home. Instead, she turned to the streets for money.
Or maybe it could have been more than just jealousy. Maybe it was something deeper, more sinister than one can imagine. And if you believe the words of Alison and Morgan, it could have actually been satanic. After looking into the life of the Careys, it's not hard to see that this family was inundated with toxicity and darkness. But just how dark was it, and for what reasons? As I've done previous videos about the rise of stardom involving Satanism and ritualistic cults for success, some believe that this is one of the many reasons that Mariah became the global superstar legend that we know today. In 2020, Alison Carey made a lawsuit against their mother Patricia, making claims that Patricia forced Alison to participate in satanic rituals as well as other horrendous activities when 10. Alison did an interview where she spoke about what happened to her inside the church castle with people draped in black, robes, candles, and, of course, blood sacrifice rituals. Here's her story.
There was a close family member involved in a satanic cult. It used to force me to attend certain rituals. There were a lot of things that I witnessed that, you know, were like secrets that you wish you didn't have to hold on to. People would be wearing black robes with hoods, you know, so you couldn't see their faces. And they'd be walking in a line, chanting the usual things that satanic cults do, like drink blood. They do that. I did suffer sexual abuse during those rituals. There are some of those satanic holidays. They always will be involved with sexual abuse with children, forcing children to have sex with adults, adults having sex with other adults. There's all kinds of stuff going on that really shouldn't be, and it shouldn't be something that children are forced to watch. Screw up a child for their whole life. I never saw Mariah with us when we were walking into, you know, the castle or anywhere with the cult. When Mariah was in any danger, when she was a child, when there was something going on where she could have been harmed, I did whatever I could do to protect her. You know, Mariah was 3 years old, and I was 11, and I was threatened, you know, if you don't do this, what we're telling you to do, and we're gonna kill your sister, you know. And when you're given that type of a threat, it's almost impossible to ignore what you're being told. Mariah, I know that you've gone through a tremendous amount of pain and difficulty. And sometimes it's as though, I know sometimes you feel as though what you're remembering didn't really happen, you know. I just want you to know that if there was ever any way that you needed help from me, just pick up the phone and call me. I would always be there for you. You know, I know that you didn't want to hear any of the things that I had to say, but just this one thing, you know, I get the sense that you're really going through a lot. Just in your head, what you're going through and some of the things that you're doing. And I understand why, even if you don't. Right? And I would help you if you'll let me.
A lot of fans like to discount Alison's words because of her shady history, but Morgan also claims to remember these events happening to him as well. They're both not sure if Mariah was ever a part of these rituals, and she may have been too young to remember if she was. But Mariah is very vague when it comes to her life. She seems to harbor a lot of trauma, but suppresses it and won't discuss things that have happened. We only truly know about her dark past with her family, but the fact that these cult members threatened young Alison that they'd kill her sister if she didn't participate makes others believe that she was the sacrifice so that Mariah could become the star she is today. But those are just some conspiracies, and we don't know if they're true. What we do know is that Mariah did in fact find her way to stardom, but the dark times would follow her, and she wouldn't be able to escape literally. When Mariah Carey was 16, she began to do big girl things in order to achieve her goal of becoming a professional singer. She would go off by herself to New York City in the late of night to record demos in this man's garage, alone. They recorded numerous songs to showcase Mariah's extraordinary talent, but he also scammed her. He had her sign a contract that he'd get 50% royalties of her first album, 40% of her second, 30% on third, and continuing on to the year 1999. So for a whole decade, he'd get paid for songs that he didn't even write or work on. Without any real adult guidance, she signed because she was so desperate to get on. This caused her issues later on, though. The smartest thing she did do was not sign over her publishing, meaning she had ownership of her songs. Mariah was pretty much homeless and sleeping on different friends' couches or her brother's vacant apartment on a mattress on the floor. Oftentimes she couldn't afford food to eat, and because she had a cat, she had to make a choice of whether she'd starve or the cat. She would go without. She did many odd jobs to stay afloat. She was a coat check girl, a cashier, and a salon hair sweeper. She didn't hold on to any of these jobs because singing always took precedence. She got fired all the time. One job she was able to hold on to and enjoyed was her job as a background singer. She provided background vocals to different session performers and eventually became a background singer for popular Latina singer of the time, Brenda K. Starr. This union would change Mariah's life forever. Brenda believed so much in Mariah that she always brought her to different entertainment industry parties, where she knew music executives would be, always telling Mariah to have her demo tape with her. In 1988, Brenda brought Mariah to a specific party that major music mogul Tommy Mottola was attending. Mariah didn't even have proper clothes to wear to this party. Brenda had to loan her a short black dress to wear. Mariah's feet were too big to fit her shoes, so she had to wear unkempt sneakers and a school letterman's jacket. In other words, Mariah was down bad, but not for long. While at this party, Tommy noticed Mariah and was intrigued by this young blonde girl. Brenda had been trying to get her demo to another music exec, and as she was trying to give the tape to him, Tommy swooped in, snatched the tape from her hand, and left the party. While he was driving away in his limo, he popped the tape in, and what he heard he could not believe. He had his driver speed back to the party so he could find her, but when he arrived, she was gone. The search was on for Mariah. Tommy did all that he could to find her and sign her. And when he did, music history changed. Mariah Carey was set up to go up against two of the biggest women in music at the time, Whitney Houston and Madonna. And in 1990, when she released her self-titled debut album, she broke records. She became the only artist to have their first 5 singles reach #1 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100 chart. She won 2 Grammys for Best New Artist and Best Female Pop Vocalist. Also, during the making of her debut album, Mariah began dating a very married and extremely older Tommy. He was 21 years older than her, and he was the president of Columbia Records, her record label. So there was a huge power imbalance there. But Mariah was always seeking safety and guidance, and she saw that in Tommy. Then immediately, without being able to take in her initial success, Tommy had her release her second album, Emotions, in 1991. The single Emotions also went #1, but the album failed to achieve the heights of her debut. Usually singers of her caliber would go on tour, but Mariah was suffering from crippling stage fright and couldn't bring herself to constantly sing on stage in front of people. Also, the difficulties of her songs made them difficult to sing often. She had to do a lot of prepping to her vocals in order to perform. The public started to say that she was a fake, and only a studio singer who did fake tricks with her voice in the studio. This kind of reputation was bad because this was after the Milli Vanilli lip-syncing debacle, and this could ruin a singer's reputation. So to combat these rumors, in 1992, Tommy made her do a live concert and album for MTV. The album was called MTV Unplugged, and it was on there where she received her 6th #1 with the cover of the Jackson 5 hit, I'll Be There. In 1993, Tommy had her release her 4th album, Music Box, and also things between Mariah and Tommy got heavier than expected. They got married. He left his wife and other children to be with the much younger star. His children felt betrayed by all this, but Tommy didn't care. He wed Mariah in an extravagant wedding where she wore her legendary wedding gown. According to Mariah, she felt that he would release his controlling grip on her if she became his wife. Maybe she'd even have a voice to finally speak up. But this could not have been further from the truth. The marriage made it worse. After getting married, Tommy moved Mariah into a massive mansion that Mariah would start to call Sing Sing after the legendary maximum security prison. It was here where Mariah would become a prisoner to Tommy and his controlling ways. He monitored her every move inside their own home, with motion detector security cameras, armed guards surrounding the estate, wouldn't let her leave the home without his permission, recruited staff members to spy on her, and even had cameras set up in every room to watch her. She describes having to hide in her shoe closet to have a private conversation. There were times that Mariah would have to sneak downstairs for a snack or to sit at the table and write down some lyrics. She says, but every time, right as I would start to settle into the calm of the quiet dark and begin to find my breath, beep, beep, the intercom would go off. I'd jump up and the words, "What you doing?" would crackle through the speaker. She couldn't do anything or go anywhere or talk to anyone. The one person that she thought was her savior from her toxic upbringing. And family was now toxic to her as well. If his mistreatment of her wasn't bad enough, Mariah also noticed Tommy's racist behaviors. She noticed he always tried to downplay her racial makeup. He wanted to market her as the white Whitney Houston and completely ignore her black side. He urged her against making what sounded like urban music, aka black-sounding music. She also says, Tommy never wanted to talk about my biracial identity. If he wasn't ashamed of it, he certainly didn't want to promote it. He only wanted her to be mainstream, aka white passing. While all this was happening, Mariah's career was soaring. She had back-to-back #1 hits and multi-platinum albums and kept setting records. But she couldn't enjoy much of it. She was a young woman in her 20s, wanting to do what most 20-somethings would. But her husband, late in his 40s, put a stop to that. Mariah longed for a way out, and that way out came through an unlikely source, a baseball player. In 1997, Mariah met baseball player Derek Jeter at a celebrity dinner and she became smitten. Like Mariah, he was also biracial and looked ambiguous. He told Mariah that his favorite song of hers is "Anytime You Need a Friend," and that touched her. They traded phone numbers and soon the two began sneaking around to be with each other. And while Mariah was recording her album Butterfly, she was completely in love and engulfed with her affair with Derek. Two of Mariah's biggest hits on the album, My All in the Roof, are about her moments with Derek. Tommy could sense something was wrong. The album title, Butterfly, symbolized someone breaking from their cocoon and being released. And the love songs she'd written about Derek were evident. Tommy could feel her intense singing and passion was coming from a real place, and not an imaginary lover like before. He could sense his extreme control over her was coming to an end, and in doing so, his behavior got worse. One of the most disturbing moments came at the end of their marriage, when Mariah made it clear that she no longer wanted to be with him at all. She says he did one of the most hurtful things he could do to humiliate her. She says, Tommy walked over and picked up the butter knife from the place, setting in front of me. He pressed the flat side of it against my right cheek. Every muscle in my face clenched, my entire body locked in place, my lungs stiffened. Tommy held the knife there. His boys watched and didn't say a word. After what seemed like forever, he slowly dragged the thin, cool strip of metal down my burning face. I was searing with rage from the excruciating humiliation of his terrifying, cowardly performance in my kitchen in front of my colleagues. That was his last show with me as the captive audience at Sing Sing. That was it. That was the last straw. In 1998, Mariah and Tommy divorced, but her troubles with him were only going to get worse. Even though they were no longer a married couple, Tommy was still her boss. He was still the head of her record company and still could make major decisions regarding her career. The release of Butterfly showed that she could be successful without being under the watchful eye of Tommy. Her two singles, Honey and My All, both hit #1 and showed her to have a sexier image. something Tommy used to forbid. Then Mariah released her next album, Rainbow, which saw 2 more #1 hits. It seems she was still staying afloat after leaving Tommy, but Tommy was going to start to sabotage her, and he was going to do it through a new artist, Jennifer Lopez. Tommy started to do things like spying on Mariah's recording sessions to see what kind of music she was creating. Then he'd steal her songs and give them to Jennifer. Mariah wrote in her memoir that Tommy used his power to make her 2001 movie, Glitter, a complete flop. She says, much of what went wrong with Glitter led back to Tommy. He was furious when I cut the strings he used to manipulate me. She continued, there was no way he would allow me to have a huge success after leaving him and Sony. He was not going to let me or Glitter shine. That same year, things got even worse. Mariah describes working on the lead single for Glitter, called Lover Boy. As she explains, her original idea was to use a sample from the song Firecracker by Yellow Magic Orchestra. However, Tommy's spies in Sony found out, and the sabotage began. Mariah wrote, after hearing my new song using the same sample I used, Sony rushed to make a single for another female entertainer on their label, whom I don't know. She was referring to Jennifer Lopez and her song I'm Real, which sampled the Firecracker track that Mariah was using. They put J-Lo's song out just before Mariah's Loverboy, and at that point Mariah had no choice but to sample the song Candy by Cameo on her track instead. He wasn't done with his obvious sabotage either. Mariah had just recently worked on an exciting collaboration with rapper Ja Rule, who Tommy also convinced to do the song with J-Lo. While Jennifer's I'm Real remix enlisted Ja Rule, Mariah was forced to change the song sample and bring in another rapper for her own remix, choosing Da Brat. Still, as Mariah wrote in her book, after all that shit, Loverboy ended up being the best-selling single of 2001 in the United States. I'm Real. Ultimately and unfortunately, her beloved project, Glitter, flopped badly. It became a joke, and soon Mariah became a target of ridicule from everyone. On top of her movie and album flopping, Mariah was beginning to have a major breakdown, and her toxic family re-entered the scene. Speaking out about the whole ordeal in her new book, The Meaning of Mariah Carey, the singer says it was not, in fact, a breakdown, but somatization, due to a combination of anxiety, exhaustion, and past trauma. All of this went down as Carey prepared for the release of Glitter and its soundtrack, with Mariah writing that she was giving as much as I could at the time. She said her schedule was relentless, and nowhere in my itinerary was there rest. After early reviews for the movie absolutely trashed it, and the lead single only hit #2 on the charts, the stress was mounting for Carey, who also felt like her team wasn't doing enough to help the situation. Taking matters into her own hands, she planned a stunt at Total Request Live to try and shift the narrative around Glitter. It did, but not in a good way. Mariah crashed the show, appearing with an ice cream cart for what she calls a highly unrehearsed moment with host Carson Daly. And while Mariah says that freestyling her segment hoping that Carson would play and riff with her, Mariah came off more like a person suffering a manic episode.
Mariah Carey! The ice cream truck! Come on! Get the truck. Hi, Carson.
What are you doing here?
Hi.
How are
I just
you?
thought I'd surprise you.
What are you wearing?
Hey.
Holy crap.
Hi. Okay, wait. Where's my spot? I got a present for you.
Okay.
Wait, where am I supposed to stand for this?
I don't know. What are you doing here is the question.
I'm here. Can you hold this?
Yeah,
I
sure.
brought you a present. It's this shirt.
Carey is stripping on TRL right now. Is it my birthday? I didn't know about it? Wow.
You like this?
Holy mackerel.
You like this?
Hey, can we get the AC cranked down? The AC. Crank it down. Get nice and cool. Wow.
You like this?
What are you doing? What did you bring?
I'm trying to. You're my therapy session right now, Carson.
Okay,
you see,
what's
it's just
wrong?
every now and then somebody needs a little therapy.
Yes, I understand
And
that.
today is that moment for me.
What's wrong? Well, you weren't.
Everything's
Aren't you
great.
busy? You just came by TRL
Hello.
to hang out? I did not know about this.
We're just here.
What is this you brought? Is this ice cream? Is
It's
this?
the ice cream truck. See, they had decorated this. Wait, try to avoid shots because these shorts are really
Yeah,
short.
just don't move. Talk about the ice cream.
But we gotta discuss this. Okay.
Things
All
are
right,
good
I
from
won't move. I won't move. But these are just some folks on the nice street. Well, we like this.
Mariah Carey's lost her mind. I don't know exactly what's going on here.
All I know is I'm just trying to I just wanted one day off when I can go swimming and look at rainbows and eat ice cream.
Right.
And maybe learn how to ride a bicycle.
Yeah, we're gonna have to help you out with that.
I don't know
Mariah.
how, but there's no ice cream left for me, huh?
We have one for you tucked away. We gotta watch your
All right.
video, lover boy.
But everything from my mom. Is that in this segment?
Sure.
My mom better be watching this. She's gonna be mad at me.
We're not going by any particular segment at this point, I don't think.
Oh,
What do you have?
we're
Is
winging
this
it?
here? Yeah, we're winging it. In more ways than
I
one.
hope my mom's watching this. Who wants a shirt? Anybody?
Hey, easy.
Careful. Easy. Take it slow.
Okay,
Wait,
I have the other
wait.
video, and I
It's
hear
the
her
ice
singing.
cream
You brought
truck.
ice cream.
Look at the ice cream truck. I brought everybody presents.
All right, here. I gotta go to break. They're killing me. I didn't know about this. We'll be right back with Mariah Carey on TRL, unexpectedly passing out.
Admitting that her performance was a bit sloppy, she went on to call the whole thing a stunt gone awry. I was like a stand-up comic who bombed a set. She acknowledged that all performers bomb, but my bombing set off a chain reaction that placed a target on my back. This led to her not sleeping at all and barely eating. As her music label tried to get her to film a new video for her second single from the Glitter album, Mariah says that she was utterly exhausted, baked, fried, and frayed at the time. She ran away and tried to hide from her management team. She hid in the apartment of one of her trusted background singers before her brother Morgan found her and brought her to their mother's home. Huge mistake because the stress only increased there. Not being able to truly rest and still hiding from her music label, Mariah tried to manage her anxiety by cleaning her mom's kitchen. While doing that, she blacked out and she was put to bed. This was her first real sleep in about a week. And before she could really fall into a deep slumber, she was awakened by her mother, who said her recording company was looking for her. Beyond exhausted and stressed out, this set Mariah off. Mariah began to become hostile with her mom and began to viciously taunt her. Her mother, Pat, felt Mariah was being aggressive and belligerent with her. She was scared, so she called the police on her own daughter. Mariah says when the police came, they immediately sided with her mom. Mariah says that the only thing the cops saw was a scared white woman in a big house full of non-white people. Even Mariah Carey couldn't compete with a nameless white woman in distress. Having a white mother did not save her. Mariah says, that night I did not have a breakdown. I was broken down by the very people who were supposed to keep me whole. The police took her to a rehab center where she was met with zero sympathy from the administrator checking her in. They told her coldly, "Looks like you need a dose of humility." In their eyes, all they saw was a spoiled diva. She eventually was able to check out before she entered another rehab center in Los Angeles, but was able to be released due to the terrorist attack on 9/11, the same day her Glitter album dropped. Once she returned home to New York, she found herself a therapist who was able to diagnose what was actually going on with her: bipolar disorder. She'd been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and she was finally able to understand what was happening to her. At his advice, she reevaluated her relationships with her family and began to call her mom Pat and referred to her siblings as her ex-brother and ex-sister. She also reconnected a relationship with God, but she has been living with the disorder for years. For a period of 4 years after being the butt of many jokes, lower record sales, and having a dip in popularity, Mariah made a huge comeback in 2005 with the album The Emancipation of Mimi. This was her 5th #1 album, and her single We Belong Together sat at #1 for 14 weeks straight. She was back with a vengeance. She won many awards and was no longer seen as a laughing stock. During this resurgence, Mariah found love in a young comedian by the name of Nick Cannon. Nick had been telling the world about his crush on Mariah, and he even claims he manifested their relationship together. The two officially met at the Nickelodeon Awards and soon began to date. Not before long, the two got married. People made fun of their union because of their age gap. Mariah is 15 years older than Nick, and many people saw Nick as corny, so their pairing was made fun of constantly. That didn't stop them from creating a family together, though. After suffering a devastating miscarriage, Mariah became pregnant with twins. Her pregnancy was dangerous, though. At 40, she was already considered a high-risk pregnancy. Then on top of that, she had gestational diabetes and the risk of seizures from preeclampsia. Her blood pressure was extremely high and dangerously so. Her back pains were so bad that she feared she'd never be able to walk properly again. She took progesterone treatments to avoid another miscarriage and hold the babies for as long as she could. But when she reached 35 weeks, the doctor said it wasn't safe anymore. In 2011, their twins Monroe and Moroccan were born by C-section, giving Mariah her own family and a chance to break generational curses. Unfortunately, her familial bliss wouldn't last. After 8 years of marriage, Mariah and Nick divorced. During the making of this video, Mariah's mother, Patricia, and her sister, Alison, both passed away on the same day. This was a very sad ending to an already trauma-filled toxic family. Alison had it very hard in life, from the trauma of dealing with being a biracial child, to being a young prostitute who unfortunately contacted the HIV virus, having her son taken away from her, to being homeless and dealing with drugs. Alison had it extremely hard in life. It's sad that she and Mariah wasn't able to really patch up their relationship on this side of Earth, but Alison deserves some recognition for the hard life she dealt with. Mariah's mother is the inspiration for Mariah becoming a singer. Patricia was an opera singer who never fully lived out her own dream. It came through the success of her baby girl. She can rest knowing that she birthed one of the greatest singer-songwriters ever. Rest in peace to Mariah's family. These days, Mariah is still booked and busy. She still tours and still does what she loves, even though people and fans alike have noticed that she seems rather stiff and rigid lately, and many wonder why. Well, if we remember the words from her sister Alison, could it be from childhood trauma that Mariah is still trying to suppress? Only Mariah knows. Mariah was the golden child, but as we can see, everything that glitters isn't always gold. So lurkers, what do you think? Do you think Mariah was sacrificed in her youth for such an amazing career? Were her siblings sacrificed for her brilliant life? Let me know down below.